Oh, Hari Bo. Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ghana Ghanatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ghana Ghana Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Gora Shri Charanara Vrindam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Gora Shri Charanara Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam 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 Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nritya Gita Vatitramadhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nritya Gita Vatitramadhyam Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Romanchakam Pasu Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shringaratanama Niramajanado Shri Juktasya bhaktamsa niyunjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Swatana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shanghan Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Swatana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shanghan Kridaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shiradikama Dabayara Para Madhura Leela Gunarupa Namna Shiradikama Dabayara Para Madhura Leela Gunarupa Namna Pratikshana Danalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Pratikshana Danalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Nekunja Yuno Rati Kelisi Dhyai Rajali Bhir Jukti Apekshaniya Nikunja Yuno Rati Tatrati Daksha Otibalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Tatrati Daksha Otibalabhasya Sakcha dharitena samasta shastre ukta tatha bhagataiva sadhavi Sakya dharitena samasta shastre ukta tatha bhagataiva sadhavi Pintu prabodja priya eva tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Kintu Prabhoya Priya Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasadam Bhagavat Prasada Jayam Stubham Tasya Yashastrin Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Jayam Stubham Tasya Yashastrin Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Jayam Stubham Tasya Yashastrin Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Vrindam Jayam Stubham Tasya Yashastri Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaro Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunavadi Pachatari Shatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunavadi Pachatari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Yadaye Namah, Krishna Jadavaye Namah, Jadavaye Madhavaye Krishavaye Namah, Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan, Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhare Gopina Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raguna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Shri Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav Radhe, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra, Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman, Nitai Gaura Haribo, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Go, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Go, Premanande. Jai Vishnu Paraparam Saprabhajakacharya Sutara Sarashishimat. His Divine Grace, ISKCON Pratishtha Bhiviti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Siramani Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana. His Divine Grace, Abhacharavindra Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai, Shri Gaurya Guru Varga Patitu Udhara Ki Jai, Shri Rup Sanatan Bhattar Gunata Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sadguru Swami Prabhu Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai, Jayananta Kuti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद स्मरण गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावरण अवतार की जय। गोल केर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। Brihatandanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopna Radha Kun Samakun Giriraj Gopodhan Ki Jai. Shri Brajabim Vrindavan Mathurdham Ki Jai. Dear Lordship Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai. Shri Maya Purnavadip Eka Chakradam Ki. Parama Karuna Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. Shri Purushottam Ketra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smas Bhadradev Sudarshan Chakra Bhagwan Ki Jai. भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशना कर श्रृंगरे भगवान की जय। जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। बोलो श्री मथुरा रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौरी प्रमानंद। All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga Hari Bol.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Praladaladaine.
Praladaladaine.
Hiranyakashipurvakshaha.
Hiranyakashipurvakshaha.
Shilatanka nakalaye.
Jaya Shilatanka nakalaye.
Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha.
Ito Nisingha Parato Nisingha.
Yato yato yami tato Narsimha.
Jaya Jata Jata Jami Tato Nisingha.
Bahe Narsimho Hridaye Narsimho.
Bahir Nisingha Hridaye Nisingha.
Narasimha Madim Charanam Prapade.
Narasingha Madim Sharanam Prapade.
Tava Kara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakasipu Tanabringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare जय जगदीश हरे
तव कर कमल बरे अद्भुत ललिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनबिंगा केशवदीता नरहरि रूप जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश
केशवद्रीता नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
केशवदीता नरहरि रूप जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे
जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव
जय नृसिंहदेव जय नृसिंहदेव नृसिंहदेव जय नृसिंहदेव
जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
जय लक्ष्मी नरसिम्हा स्वामी की जय
श्री वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे सत्तवताय नमो नमः वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे सत्यवताय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रारे सत्यवताय नमो नमः जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की
नमो तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
जे तुम्हारा शरण लय तारा वंश पूर्ण होय
जे तुम्हार शरण लाय तारा वंश पुना
कृपा कोरी करो तारे वृंदावन वासी
তুমি কৃপা করে করা তারে বৃন্দাবনবাসী
मोरा अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास
মোরায়ে আবেলা বিলাস কুঞ্জে দিয়াবা
नयने हरिब सदा युगल रूप राशि
আমি নায়ানে দেব সদা যুগল রূপরাশি
এই নিবেদন দারো সখীরানুগাত কর
এই নিবেদনাধার সখীরয়ানুগত কর
সেবাধিকার দিয়ে কর নিজ দাসী
সেবায়ারে কর দিয়ে কর নিজ দাসী।
দীন কৃষ্ণ দাসে কয়ে নামরা হয়
দীন কৃষ্ণ দাস কয়ে নামরা
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদা নবাসী
রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদা নবাসী
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদা নবাসী
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদা নবাসী
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
तानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्यानि कनिशा तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्या पादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
तानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यानि कनिषा तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
तानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
तानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा
Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva.
नित्य गौरा हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Bai Piyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Satyavataye Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Bai Piyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Satyavataye Namah. Vrindaye Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Pradidevi Satyavataye Namah. जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय. O Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavidams of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. So, there are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees of dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the fearless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. So now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Bancha Kalpatarubhyacha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Anantakuti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikhastakam Ki Jai. Jaito Darpanamarjanam Bhavamada Vagni Nirvapanam Shreyakari Vachantika Vitaranam Vidya Vadu Jivanam Anandam Bhurivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvatmasnam Param Param Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrarpita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Ita Drushitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaivam Idrishamya Janina Nuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sashnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vajagarisha Maye Mama Janmane Janmanishwari Bhavatar Bhakti Raituki Tvai Oinandatanu Karam Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Budho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stita Dhuli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galara Shudharaya Vadanam Gadagarudhaya Gira Pulake Nichitam Vapukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavishyati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakyusha Prabhusaitam Sunyaitam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me Aslishava Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshnar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatata Thava Vidadhatulam Pato Matpranatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Kyastakam Ki Jai. Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnayo Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurati Shanama. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunnavadi Pasatyare Satarine. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can lend all benediction to living beings, and thus we have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names, O my Lord. Out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion, service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I am fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, if handles me rightfully by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Kyastakam Ki Jai. So Shri Guru Vandana Mangala Charan. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakchurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeyam Shri Guru Sri Jyotapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatha Vintam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Visakam Vitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padayo Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunnavadi Pasatyari Satarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namine Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Deitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Daine Prabhave Nama Madhur Jojala Premadhya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtai Ninatarine Rupanuga Virudha Posidanta Dantaharine Namagora Kishoraya Sakchaveraga Murtaye Vipralambhara Sambhode Padamujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchitananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhumiswam Nirdesha Sajana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannathayate Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो महावरणाय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनामिने गौरतीशे नमः पञ्चतत्त्वमकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारो भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधा कान्त नमोऽस्तुते जयतां सुरतोपाङ्गोर्ममन्दमतिर्गतिर्मत्सर्वस्य पदं भोजो राधामदनमोहनं दिव्यविन्दरण्यकल्पद्रुमाधा स्मारनगार सिंहासनस्थो स्माराधा शिलागोविन्ददेवो स्मर सरसरम्भे वंश्वात ततस्थित कर्षन् वेणुस्वानारि गोपीर्गोपीनाथ श्रीस्तुन तप्त कंचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुति देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्तविंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे श्री गुरु वंदन मंगल चरण की जय गौर प्रमानंद हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So today we're going to finish the comparison of the allegory of the cave with that of the first 4 verses of the 15th chapter, Bhagavad Gita. And by doing that, you see how everything started from the Vedic knowledge, but the farther west you go, the more it becomes denatured due to speculation, and ultimately is due to not accepting a bona fide spiritual master. That's why people speculate and deviate from Shastric evidence. So we read the first mantra yesterday. Now today we'll do the second, third, and fourth. So the second mantra says, the branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Okay, so you have several points, at least 4 points made here. The branches of this tree extend downwards and upward, and they're nourished by the 3 modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. This is very profound information. It shows you could say the mechanism of entrapment in the material world. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The description of the banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches spread in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of living entities, human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, cats, etc. These are situated on the lower parts of the branches, whereas on the upper parts are higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas, and many other higher species of life. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. Sometimes we find that a tract of land is barren for want of sufficient water, and sometimes the tract is very green. Similarly, where particular modes of material nature are proportionally greater in quantity, the different species of life are manifest accordingly. Now that is a very profound statement. We should stop and think about what he just said, what Prabhupada just said. So in this world, you'll see places that are lush green with a lot of plants and varieties. And even in a jungle, there are plants that are have flowers. Other plants have flowers and fruits. There are trees without fruits, or their fruits are things that you can't really eat easily, like very hard nuts or other things. So we see that in a lush jungle, there is a huge amount of diversity. But now compare that to a desert where there's hardly any diversity except a lot of sand, and there may be some plants, but they're not very well. Some of them are useful, and some of them are not. And so that means that a desert area, okay, no whispering, no whispering. And in the desert area, that's more in the mode of ignorance. And in the lush green area with all kinds of varieties, that's more in the mode of goodness. Just like there's a English poet named Culpeper. Look him up. Culpeper. Culpeper, C-U-L-P-E-P-P-E-R. I think that's his name. Anyway, he said that the city is, basically he said, the city is in the mode of ignorance, and the countryside is in the mode of goodness. He didn't use those words, but that's what he meant. Do you see anything, Culpeper? Does it say he's an English poet? Huh?
Seems these are the fruits which turn bright based upon the sunlight.
What is this, Culpeper? No, but what does it say there? What are you reading from?
Is it cow hot pepper?
No, okay, that's not it. All right, we'll come back to that later. So, and that's a fact. When you live in the countryside that's lush green, it's really in a mode of goodness. And life is a lot more simple and easy and much easier to be Krishna conscious. When you live in a city, it's full of passion and ignorance. So it's more difficult to have a peaceful life, and it's more difficult to cultivate Krishna consciousness. But it's not impossible, right? Obviously, we know that. Okay, so when it says, where particular modes of material nature are proportionately greater in quantity, the different species of life are manifested accordingly. So if you live in the desert, then you'll be more in the mode of goodness. Mode of ignorance than in the mode of goodness. And if you live in a big city, you'll be more in a mode of passion and ignorance. So the nature also, you can understand places and nature by the influence of the modes of material nature. So therefore, we should strive always to live in a sattvic, environment. So even in the midst of hell, you can have a sattvic environment if you're Krishna conscious. So wherever genuine devotees go, they can transform that place into spiritual reality. And that is the mercy of Krishna that you're able to do that. So that's also explained here in the 4th chapter, 24th verse. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam. Brahmaeva tena gantavya brahmakarma samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Now, you might not understand much by hearing this, but it's actually extremely profound. But when reading the purport, then you get a much more clear understanding of how profound this verse is. And it says, how activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul, entangled in material contamination, is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. So now this is very profound. It's explaining how you can even be living in hell and you can develop Krishna consciousness and even influence where you're living. That's what we did here when I first came here. This was basically a very, very, let's say, inauspicious property. It had a broken down house that was infested with, rats and cockroaches and things. And the rest of the land was not really, didn't look really exciting at all. And it was relatively a small property, a little bit more than 1 acre. And also, the only good thing about it was it had a well. And the water from that well was really wonderful. And when we did build the temple, we were forced to close the well by the city, unfortunately, because the water from that well was just amazing. Anyway, so it did have some good qualities, and it had a few fruit trees also. There was several fruit trees here. So it had some good things and bad things. But the house was a wreck. But for 16 years, we lived in that house, and we turned it into a temple, amazingly. I remember when people used to jump up and down in ecstatic kirtan, the floor would go up and down like this, right? And then the roof, you could feel it shaking, like it's going to fall down at any time. But, somehow or other we were able to create a Krishna conscious community. And many people who would come to the temple, they said, well, this doesn't look like a temple. It looks like a broken down house. Well, that was true. I remember one time this lady came who was a very wealthy lady, and she looked at some of the curtains in the temple and said, oh, I'm never coming back here. The curtains are not clean. So these were the type of things we were dealing with. But in any case, we were able to build this temple with prayers, basically, and service. And the deities, of course, made the whole temple seem wonderful, even though it was a broken down house. So this is the same thing here. It says, a conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. So here again, now we see the major difference between Mayavad philosophy and Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi will try and stop all activity. Yeah, I mean, you tell me if this is true or not. The ultimate goal of the Mayavadis is to meditate completely 24 hours a day in a secluded place. Is that true or false?
Yes.
How do you know it's true?
Because they're basically stopping all activity. Their intention is to stop all activity.
Yeah, because that's Buddhism and Mayavadism. Both are Mayavadis. The Buddhists definitely want to stop all activities. And the Mayavadis also, they don't stop everything. They want to continue meditation. Buddhists also will even deny meditation eventually. They just or they meditate on nothingness. I'm sorry, but the Mayavadis will meditate on the light or the Brahman effulgence. So that's a slight difference between Buddhists and Buddhist Mayavadis and the hardcore Mayavadis. So this is an important point, that by stopping material activities, you don't really stop karma. Although you would think karma would stop. But just the desire to merge into the Brahma Jyoti and become God is a material desire. It's not actually a spiritual desire. What's the material part of it? The desire to become God. So, therefore, the Mayavadis have got everything wrong, even their final goal. In spite of the Mayavadis' false conception of the final goal, the Brahman effulgence is a place of eternal life, or eternal existence, let's put it like that. But the Mayavadis will eventually fall down because of this false desire to become God, or merge into God, or think that there's nothing beyond the Brahman effulgence. Okay, so here it says, the materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be completely absorbed in Krishna conscious activities. And therefore, we will no longer be acting on the material plane. We're acting on the spiritual level as soon as that happens. And it's very possible and very easy for it to happen. The word Brahma, or Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti. But when the Jyoti, in other words the light, is covered by illusion, or maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. So as soon as we engage in material activities of selfish eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, we come under the influence of maya. Do the same things for the pleasure of Krishna, you exit maya, and now you're under the spiritual potency of, or yogamaya potency of Krishna. So, it all depends on what our purpose is, what our desire is. If we desire to please ourselves, we come under the influence of maya. If we desire to please Krishna, we come under the influence of yoga, by which we come closer and closer to Krishna. So now it says, this material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together Brahman, or the absolute truth. So, let's go over this. The material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness. Well, let's say the offering is a fruit. The consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, well, that is first and foremost Krishna, and then Krishna, out of his mercy, offers it back as his prasadam, and then the living entity consumes the prasadam, right? The process of consumption, well, the process of consumption is the offering that you're making with sincere prayers. When Krishna hears the prayers, he actually, that are sincerely offered, he tastes the prasadam. The contributor, that's you, and the result, well, the result is, if the Lord is pleased, everything becomes spiritual. Are all combined together Brahman. Brahman means spiritual, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth, regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the supreme absolute truth. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the absolute. Okay, now that's, again, a defining statement. Are people who are performing so-called yajnas for personal benefit actually performing a yajna, which is meant to as a sacrifice for Krishna? No, they're not. And when the Brahmin says, okay, say mama. Mama, what does mama mean? In other words, this sacrifice is done for me, right? So therefore, it is not being offered to Krishna. It's not actually a beneficial, let's say, a beneficial sacrifice that can liberate you from the cycle of birth and death. You see? So when the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer, or the leader of the performance, and the result are ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. So here's a different concept of oneness than the Mayavadi concept of oneness. The different concept of oneness explained here is becoming one with the desire of Krishna, not becoming Krishna. So we always keep our individual identity as a jiva, and Krishna always keeps his individual identity as the Supreme Personality Godhead. We can never be equal to Krishna or greater than Krishna. We're always subordinate to the Lord. But we become one by agreement to follow Krishna's instructions and actually follow them. Not only you agree with it, you have to actually follow it. Okay, so we came to that verse by reading where particular modes of material nature are proportionately greater in quantity, the different species of life are manifested accordingly. So, if we are still under the influence of the modes of material nature, it influences also where we're going to live. There is such thing called geographical astrology. Have you ever heard that term, geographical astrology? Yeah, well, there are astrologers who can tell you where you should live. And if you live in the wrong place, you'll always be in difficulty. And if you live in the right place, you'll mostly be successful. Now, there's a material conception of geographical astrology and a spiritual conception of it. The spiritual conception of it is we should always live in a place that is Krishna conscious. So you can say, oh, that means we have to all move to India, to Vrindavan or Srirangam. No, this place is Krishna conscious because everything we do here is meant to please Krishna, right? So this is a facsimile of Goloka Vrindavan, if everybody is following, right? And if we all follow sincerely Krishna consciousness and help each other also, this is as good as living in Vaikuntha. Even though it's in the center of a passionate and ignorant society. Okay, so there is a spiritual understanding of things and a material understanding of things. So here it says, where particular modes of material nature are proportionally greater in quantity to different species of life are manifested accordingly. So we don't want to be under the influence of the modes of material nature. So if we actually practice Krishna consciousness, all the rules and regulations and chanting Hare Krishna will be promoted to Suddha Sattva, not simply goodness, but transcendental goodness. Then we're no longer influenced by the modes of material nature. That place becomes spiritual. And everything we do is actually on the spiritual level, not on the material level. Okay, so the twigs of the tree are considered to be sense objects. By development of the, sense objects means, cars and houses and boats and vacations and you know what I mean. The twigs of the tree are considered to be the sense objects. By development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses. And by the senses, we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. Okay, when it says different senses, that means that you have a sense that somebody else doesn't have. No, it means that the sense, let's say, of sight, instead of being used to look at naked people or things like that, you only use that sight to see Krishna and Krishna's devotees. So someone who's using the eyes to see naked people, they've changed the purpose of the senses to something that is negative. But to use the eyes to see Krishna, that is the correct use of the sense of sight. So therefore it says, by development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses, and by the senses we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. The tips of the branches are the senses. So in other words, our senses can be in goodness, passion, or ignorance, right? But we can also transcend and have no more influence of this goodness, passion, and ignorance, but under the influence of transcendental goodness. The tips of the branches are the senses, the ears, nose, eyes, etc., which are attached to the enjoyment of different sense objects. The twigs are sound, form, touch, and so on. So these are the knowledge-acquiring senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and the objects of those senses, such as seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, etc. So the objects of the senses are called tan mantras. Look that up, tan mantras, T-A-N, not tan mantra, but tan mata. That means the objects of the senses. The subsidiary roots are attachments and aversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering, and sense enjoyment. So by sense enjoyment, we develop attachments to material things. And also hatred of things. Like, for example, you could easily say that the Ukrainians are attached to their land and country and identity. And they hate the Russians who have invaded their land and their identity. Right? And the Russians, they're attached to their land and their identity. In fact, they think that some of the land that belongs to Ukraine belongs to them, and because of that, they're having a fight. Right? They're killing each other. So the subversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and enjoyment. So subsidiary roots means the roots going down into the material nature are these different varieties or products of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. The tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. So, someone who is successful in life, and also maybe because they perform yagyas for self-improvement rather than actually pleasing the Lord, they are considered to be pious people, but it's not actually pure piety. It's mixed piety. It's therefore they stay in the material world. And then other people who are envious of God and try in every way to avoid God, they are impious. They're considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. The real root is from Brahma. So the root is not down, but it's up. And the real root is from Brahmaloka, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma or fruit of activities for promotion. So when we enter the material world initially, we start from the position of Brahma. And then by making mistakes and not following strictly Krishna's instructions, we go down, all the way down to an amoeba. And then we can start coming back up again, but for a very, very long time. Now you would say, everybody started as Brahma, a Brahma. That's what it says. And that's why it says here, after one enjoys the results of various activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his before that he says, the tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. The real root is from Brahmaloka, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma or fruit of activities for promotion. This planet of human beings is considered the field of activities. Okay, so now actually is he referring to something else? What I just said is true, and I'll give you the Shastric evidence for it, that when we first fall down from the material world, we begin from the position of Brahma, and then we go down. But what's being referred to here in the purport is explained. It says, the real root is from Brahmaloka, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth. So this is in the 9th chapter, and verse number, let's see where it is. Yes, verse number 20. Te tam bhukva swargalokam vishalam, shine punye martya lokam vishanti, evam trayi dharmam anuprapana gata gatam kama labante, which means When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasures, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas, meaning Rig and Sama and Yajur Vedas, achieve only repeated birth and death. Okay, so the previous verse to that is, those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth in the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly results. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. So this is the problem of following the Varnashram system without a bona fide guru, with a kangaroo who misleads you, and therefore you get stuck in this up, down cycle of being pious, going to the heavenly planets, engaging in fantastic sense gratification, and coming back down again, starting all over. Okay, so then So let's see, Chaitanya Sundar, you want to get me the sheets that are in the photocopier? Yeah. Okay, so then if we come back to the 15th chapter and the last two verses, 3 and 4, it says, the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends. Is that it? Yeah. Where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Okay, so here he is emphasizing, or the emphasis is on detachment, in order to free ourselves from this unending tree of material sense gratification, or this upside down banyan tree. That's what you would say an allegorical facsimile of the material nature. The material nature is actually an upside down, perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Therefore, it is a place of falsity. Everything looks real. We try and accept it as reality, but actually it's illusory, and eventually it'll disappear. And everything that we thought was permanent is actually impermanent. Now, there is the existence. Just like if I put my hand here, and now I'm seeing my shadow, my hand right here, the shadow implies that there's something real, but the shadow itself is not real. In other words, if I try and shake hands with my shadow hand, it doesn't respond, right? And although it moves exactly, why don't you do it? Like put your hand out. Do you see the shadow of your hand?
Yep.
Okay. That shadow tells you that there is a hand, and the hand is something real, but the shadow itself is not real, in the sense that, you try and shake hands or you try and grab something with your shadow, it's not going to be able to grab anything. So this upside down banyan tree is like that shadow. It's only the shadow of reality. It's not the actual reality, but yet we get stuck in it. Birth after birth, life after life, for hundreds and millions and sometimes billions of years. And it's almost impossible to get free unless we have the help of bona fide Siksha and Diksha gurus who are speaking correctly the words of Krishna and the Acharyas and Prabhupada. Okay, so then it says, it is now clearly stated in the purport, it is now clearly stated that the real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in this material world. Since the root is upwards, the extension of the real tree is at the other end, when entanglement with the material expansions of the tree, when entanglement with the material expansions of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends, nor can one see the beginning of this tree. Yet, one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father, and my father is the son of such and such a person, etc. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by the Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, that is the end of research work. One has to search out that origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, by the understanding, one becomes gradually detached from this false reflection of reality. And by knowledge, one can cut the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. The word asanga is very important in this connection because the attachment for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material nature is very strong. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to Him. The description of that place, whence, having gone, one never returns to this false reflected tree, is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. So in other words, it's not just Brahma. Brahma is subordinate to Krishna. So, but many people just stop at Brahma. They don't try and go any further. And they, again, have incomplete knowledge, and they will eventually fall down. You have to keep going until you come to Krishna. Then you have the whole truth, absolute truth. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The description of that place, whence having gone one never returns to this false reflected tree, is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain favor of that personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing and chanting, etc. So if you regularly hear and chant the glories of Krishna, you will surrender to the Lord gradually. He is the cause of the extension of the material world. This has already been explained by the Lord Himself. Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, that's 10th chapter, 8th verse. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from this material extension. Okay, so here we have the problem and the solution. But most people will not accept the solution, or they'll accept it partially. But most people don't accept it at all. So therefore, the problem never goes away. That's why they started the League of Nations to stop war. Nothing stopped. Then they started the United Nations to stop war. Nothing has stopped. So they know what the problem is. It's war, but they don't know how to stop it. Right? So if you take the Krishna consciousness and develop this detachment to sense gratification and replace your attachment to pleasing the senses of Krishna, you have now the cure for the problem. But like I said, most people won't accept it. Okay, so now that we did our little excursion into Plato's incomplete allegory of the cave, and now we read the real allegory of entanglement in the material world, which is first to fourth verse of the 15th chapter. Now we go back to understanding the absolutely unique qualities of Lord Krishna. But we diverted again yesterday a little bit by talking about Pythagoras. So I believe at least 3-4 people did their homework. Yeah, okay. So let's hear what your homework is, because it's an interesting subject. And now we have the equal opportunity microphone. We have an equal opportunity microphone. We can advertise that on the internet. You know. Yes, it's the real power. Okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hare Krishna. I think the homework was to research about Pythagoras and understand his philosophy and see if you see any parallels, or understand if you see any parallels with Vedic philosophy. So first I'm going to describe who he is and just talk about his philosophy that I found online at a high level, and then talk about areas where I found it kind of aligns a little bit with Vedic philosophy and where there are some contradictions. Pythagoras was born in Samos in Greece, and he also died he was born in 570 BC, and he died around 500 to 490 BC in Italy. He was a Greek philosopher, mathematician, and founder of the Pythagorean Brotherhood that, although religious in nature, formulated principles that influenced the thought of Plato and Aristotle and contributed to the development of mathematics and Western rational philosophy. So what is his philosophy? It's named as Pythagoreanism. I think most of us are familiar with the mathematical formulations from him, but there's deeper philosophy. The character of the original Pythagoreanism is controversial, and the conglomeration of disparate features that it displayed is intrinsically confusing. Its fame rests, however, on some very influential ideas, not always correctly understood, that have been ascribed to it since antiquity. These ideas include those of, number one, the metaphysic of number and the conception that reality, including music and astronomy, is at its deepest level mathematical in nature. Number two.
Now this is the basis of most scientific research today. The idea that you can understand nature because it is following rules of mathematics. And you can reduce things to mathematical equations. Well, that's what they do, right? Like Einstein's, E equals mc squared. It's a mathematical equation. In other words, what's on the left-hand side of the equal point is basically the same that's on the right-hand side. They're equal, right? And it's all based on mathematical concepts. That Pythagoras was not the first to do it, but he was seemingly the first in Western culture that did. I mean, where did he get it from? He got it from India. Well, not India, but from Bharat. Right? Go ahead.
Second, the use of philosophy as a means of spiritual purification. So this is one place where there was slight reference to spiritual purification. And third, the
Okay,
heavenly...
what was that spiritual purification? He had an ashram where people followed regulative rules and regulations. They were vegetarian. They didn't engage in illicit sex. They lived very simply, minimalist life. So it was an ashram, just like in Bharat, and they were brahmacharis. But he also accepted women, and that was an extraordinary thing, because at that time women were not given education, right? But he accepted them equally as the men. So he was really way ahead of his time. Go ahead.
Third, the heavenly destiny of the soul and the possibility of its rising to union with the divine.
So he believed in reincarnation. He didn't believe you only have one life. And he believed in yajna, in other words, sacrificing your tendency for sense gratification and replacing it with spiritual activities. Right. The only problem is he was a Mayavadi. But he was a good Mayavadi in the sense you could say he was not a Mayavadi. He was more close to being a bona fide impersonalist, right? Not exactly a pure bona fide impersonalist, but he was close to it. Go ahead.
Number 4, the appeal to certain symbols, sometimes mystical, such as the tetractys, the golden section, and the harmony of the spheres.
So in other words, he was dealing in what do you call those mandalas, right? And he came up with a whole bunch of mandalas that have spiritual significance. Go ahead.
Number 5, the Pythagorean theorem. I think this is the more popular one. And number 6, the demand that members of the order shall observe a strict loyalty and secrecy. Pythagoreanism seems to have represented a soul-directed subjectivism.
Okay, now there's a difference right there. Why is he talking about secrecy? It's just like, when Ramanujacharya, he was given a secret mantra that could liberate a person. And he had to promise his guru that he would, one of his gurus who gave it to him, that he would never repeat it to anyone. The first thing he did was leave his guru. He went to a public place and invited everyone to come and taught them the mantra. So this idea, you have to take a vow of secrecy. Why keep something beneficial for the public secret? Well, you could find reasons why to do that. You'd say, well, they will, just like theoretically, we're not supposed to preach to non-devotees, but yet we take the risk to do that, right? Understanding that, look, we know that Krishna's real desire is for all living entities to come back to Godhead, because they're all his prajas, we all came from Krishna, so we should all go back to him. So therefore we take that risk, even though Krishna says don't do it, right? But we understand what is Krishna's purpose or desires. He wants all his living entities to come back to him. Okay, go ahead.
So this kind of philosophy was alien to the mainstream of pre-Socratic Greek thought, centering on the Ionian coast of Asia Minor, which was preoccupied with determining what the basic cosmic substance is.
Okay, at that time, Greece was not only the country that we know today, but it also spread into what's known today as Turkey. And all the different islands. There are many, many islands that belong to Greece today, and there are some that now they're fighting over with the Turks. So before, the Greeks spread right through what is known today as Turkey. And go ahead.
It also seemed like they were more before Pythagorean and like Socratic influence. They were more focused on understanding the cosmic substance, like more the matter, versus talking about the soul. Is that true, Maharaj?
I didn't understand. What did you say?
Like before Pythagorean philosophy, the analysis or thought process from the Greek was more focused on cosmic substance or matter.
Was more focused on matter.
Matter, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
In contrast with such Ionian naturalism, Pythagoreanism was akin to trends seen in mystery religions and emotional movements such as Orphism. This one was interesting. Orphism, which often claimed to achieve through intoxication a spiritual insight into the divine origin and nature of the soul.
Yeah, I'm not understanding all the words you're saying. Let me see what. Okay, that's all right.
I'll share this
Just
with
say
you,
that
Maharaj.
again slowly.
In contrast with such Ionian naturalism,
Okay, Ionian. So, naturalism means material sources of things. Go ahead.
Pythagoreanism was akin to
Was
trend.
what? Was what?
Akin, A-K-I-N, is similar.
Akin. That's
Akin.
akin. You
Yeah.
That's why I can't understand.
Sorry.
You're mispronouncing all the words. You're speaking English, not English. It's not akin. It's akin.
Akin. Okay.
That means it's related to.
Pythagoreanism is akin to trends seen in mystery religions.
To what?
To trends. Trend. T-R-E-N-D.
Yeah.
Trends seen in mystery religions.
Okay, so it is akin to trends seen in mystery religions. In other words, he's talking about belief in eternal souls, talking about you can become liberated, and there's a spiritual world. All that language there, akin to what was it again? Yeah, the mystery religions. Well, the mystery is, like for example, how do jivas enter the material world? Well, it's by the vision of Mahavishnu. That's a mystery. How can such a thing happen? You see. So there are plenty of mysteries. So this is a way of saying, well, this is not really science. It's a mystery. So Pythagoras was very close to being a devotee, and therefore they have to use words to make it look as if, well, this is something that we don't understand because you can't validate its existence materially, right? So therefore they call it a mystery.
The Pythagoreans, for example, displayed an interest in metaphysics, as did their naturalistic predecessors.
Okay, so there's metaverse, there's metaphysics, right? So metaphysics, you can learn to look it up in the dictionary right now. It's talking about something that you cannot really quantify as they want to do everything in material science. It's dealing with metaphysics means it's dealing with spiritual issues and spiritual reality. What does it say?
It's the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space.
Okay, but actually it's talking about spiritual things.
Yeah, it also says metaphysics is the study of many different topics, but they all revolve around the core question of what we are and what our purpose is.
Okay, but if you really want to know what we are and what our purpose is, you have to go to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. You have to go to spiritual sources, not material sources. Go ahead.
Though, though they tried to they claimed to find its key in mathematical form rather than in any substance.
Right. So that's why he was like a modern mathematician way before his time, because modern mathematicians, they want to reduce everything into mathematical formulas. Go ahead.
They accepted the essentially Ionian doctrines that the world is composed of opposites, wet, dry, hot, cold, and so on, and generated from something unlimited. But they added
Generated from what?
generated from something unlimited.
Yeah, okay. See, they have no concept of God. They're Mayavadis. They have no concept of God, so they talk about something unlimited. And what is that? What is they talking about? They're talking about dualities. Well, dualities are what bewilder people in the material world, because they don't have knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is one, and we're supposed to be one with Him through agreement of following His instructions. So they're talking about some nebulous infinity or infinitive thing that they don't really know what it is. And okay, go ahead. So, see, it's all Mayavad philosophy now, or
So-
impersonalist philosophy.
When it came to the religion and ethics, they talk about the belief in the transmigration of souls provided a basis for the Pythagorean way of life.
In other words, you don't just die and everything is over. You reincarnate. So that's implying that you have an eternal soul.
And this part also was kind of interesting. Some Pythagoreans deduced from this belief the principle of the kinship of all beings.
Well, yeah, we're all children of Krishna. We all have an original source. That's Krishna.
Again, this part was, this seems more like a Mayavadi thing. Like Pythagoras himself seems to have claimed a semi-divine status.
As what?
Semi-divine? Semi-divine.
He
Like a half-divine.
he conceived of semi-divine.
Yeah, he himself seems to have claimed a semi-divine status in close association with the superior god Apollo.
Okay, anyway, we don't have to read anymore. We get the idea now. He had some things right and some things wrong. But the things he had right were very close to Krishna consciousness. And how did he do that? Well, there's several theories. One is that he got that knowledge in Egypt. And the other is that he actually went to India and got that knowledge. So, but one way or other, he got knowledge of transcendence, but he didn't get the full knowledge, because you have to actually surrender to a bona fide guru for that, who's in the disciplic succession. So he got it secondhand with other people that had parts of it knowledge, but not complete knowledge. Okay, so like I said, there's a misunderstanding of these, Greek philosophers, although they did some things that seem to be very more advanced than their time, 2,500 years ago. Like, for example, Pythagoras said certain things about planetary movements and etc., but he didn't have a telescope, and he didn't have modern technology, but yet he said things that were correct, absolutely correct, about the movement of the planets and so forth. So, he came in touch with esoterical, let's say, pundits, either in Egypt or maybe he did go to India, I don't know. Okay, so we'll stop right there. This was just a tangent to understand how studying Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, you're going to get the full knowledge. Studying all these other books and taking philosophy courses and learning about this one and that one, you're just going to get partial knowledge, which is misleading in the end and incomplete. Okay, So then what time is it now? Okay. All right, so tomorrow we'll go back completely to the unique qualities of Krishna. I have a lot to say about that. Haribol. Are there any questions? Yes. Yes, sir. The homework for tomorrow is to read 9th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, verses, because that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Verses 5 to 9. 9, 5 to 9. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay? 9, 5 to 9, 11. And you're going to be shocked. You're going to be really shocked. You're going to be shocked to see how much Prabhupada put into his Bhagavad Gita. Unbelievable. Haribol. Okay. Any other questions? Yes? Just read it. We're going to go over it very carefully tomorrow.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
So, in the description of the tree in Bhagavad Gita 15 chapter 2nd verse, it says that the subsidiary roots are attachments and aversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. So I didn't really understand where the attachments and aversions are coming from.
Where the attachment and?
Aversions.
Aversion. Aversion means hatred. Attachment means you like it very much. Well, it comes from, let's look at the 13th chapter, verse number 13th chapter, verse number 4 and 5. 13th chapter, no. Verse number 6 and 7. Mahabhutani hankaro bhutir avyaktameva cha indriyani dasaikam cha pancha chandriya gochara icha dvesa sukham dukam sangatas chitanadriti. So, what does that say? That icha dvesa sukham dukam. It says, the 5 great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception or tamasa buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. Okay. Before that it says, then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. Okay, so you're talking about attachments and aversions, right? So this is exactly the same thing as desire and hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. So we have earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Now, there are some things made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether that we're attracted to, and we desire, and we become attached to. And there are other things made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether that we're not attracted to, and we actually can develop hatred of it, you see. Now, these are forms that are made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And they take up space, and they develop qualities under the influence of the modes of material nature. So some of them we're attracted to, and some of them we're not attracted to. Or some of them we desire, and some of them we hate. So what should be our position as Krishna conscious person? Detachment. We should be detached to the things we're attracted to because they're temporary. And we should be detached from the things we're not attracted to and we hate because they're temporary. If you're attached or detached, if you're attached to either the good things or hate the bad things, you're going to stay in the material world. That's the whole point. Because these are simply interactions that are representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. They're simply interactions of these 5 great, or Mahabhutas, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And whether we're attracted to them or we hate them, both positions will keep us in the material world. You understand?
Yes, Maharaj. So the process for detachment for attachments is like you're removing yourself.
Use them in Krishna's service.
Okay, so even whatever you have a hatred for, you also view that.
What? Have what?
Whatever you have hatred for, or whatever you.
Hatred, not hatred. Hatred sounds like you're heating it up, like with a heater. Hatred.
Whatever you have hatred for, so you have to also view that in relation to Krishna. Or how?
Yes. So you can solve the problem by learning how to use everything in Krishna's service. And if you can't do it, then because you can't, there's certain things you just don't know how to use it in Krishna's service, then you have to ultimately develop this detachment to the things that you like and the things you don't like. Now, does that mean you don't use things in Krishna's service? Because if you do, it's like you're attached. No. When you have more knowledge, you'll be able to use everything in Krishna's service. But while you're still not sure about how to use some things in Krishna's service, the detachment is really important. So when you hate something, you're not detached. You're connected to it. You see my point? You can't get it out of your mind because you hate it. So you have to be detached. Not like or not hate. And how can you be detached? When you're attached to Krishna, then you're detached to the things you think you like in the material world and the things you don't think you like in the material world. So this is explained by Krishna also. Let's see where that is. This is explained. This is the end of the 8th chapter. Okay, I'm going to have to find this later on. Let's have the Guru Puja, and I will give the last point, about detachment. Good. So we'll have Guru Puja. Okay, I found it. It's at the end of the. Okay, we'll do it after Guru Puja. Go ahead, start.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bandho Mui Savadana Mate Jahara Prasade Bai E Bhava Toriya Jai Krishna Prapti Hoy Aha Hoy Te Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitite Koriya Kya Arana Kori Hamane Asha Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेद गाय जहाँ चरितो Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Loke Nath Loke Rajivana Ha ha Prabhu karo doya deho more pada chaya Ha ha Prabhu karo doya deho more pada chaya Ebe jas gushuk tribhuvana Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Nama Om विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material desires, obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing this character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. You're famous by all of the world. We take charge of your lotus feet.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya. Okay, so the answer to your question, Shasta, is the 6th chapter, verses 33 to 35, where it says, Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga, which you have summarized, that is, what he's talking about was Astanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Hatha Yoga, appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. And then he says, the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. Now Krishna speaks. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Samsayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena Tukonteya Vairagyena Chagriyate. Lord Shri Krishna said, O mighty-armed son of Kunti, Arjuna, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. So let's see what it says in the purport. The difficulty of controlling the obstinate mind, as expressed by Arjuna, is accepted by the personality of Godhead. But at the same time, he suggests that by practice and detachment, it is possible. So what's talking about practice? Following the regular principles, chanting Hare Krishna, eating prasadam, etc., etc. You know, I've repeated it many times, right? And so that's practice. And then detachment means you analyze what it is that you're attracted to or not attracted to. It's going to be earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and also those are the gross elements. So you might be very attached to, like, let's say, the sunrise. And you might be really turned off and even hate darkness, right? But both of those things are made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, right? Or you may be very much attached to a handsome man or a handsome woman, right? And really very hateful of ugly men and ugly women. But they also are just made of earth, water, fire, air, ether, their bodies, and they have a little extra something called mind, intelligence, and ego. So both ways, both of those things are temporary. The material things that are gross, and even the material things that are temporary, that are subtle, they're temporary. So you have to be detached, understanding that they are temporary. They're not going to last forever. But you have an eternal soul that is not temporary. So that's what you should focus on. And you have an eternal relationship with Krishna that is not temporary. So if you focus on that, then you can be detached from these other things that are just made of earth, water, fire, air, ether, and maybe some things that has mind, intelligence, and false ego. So there's suitable practice and detachment. What is that practice? In the present age, no one can observe the strict rules and regulations of placing oneself in a sacred place, focusing the mind on the supersoul, restraining the senses and mind, observing celibacy, remaining alone, etc. By practice, so that's the traditional way of, Astanga yoga or Jnana yoga, to attain some realization of God. By practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. That's what we're doing. We're hearing about Krishna every day. This is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. Purging means cleansing, getting rid of everything negative and replacing it with everything positive. Right? But what are the negative things? The misgivings. Oh, if I do this, then I won't be able to do that. And I really like, eating chocolate, but then they say chocolate shouldn't be eaten. But I like chocolate. You see, all these things are misgivings, right? The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can very easily learn vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind in service, in spirit. In other words, you detach from matter and you engage the mind in spirit, or in spiritual things. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching a mind to the activities of Krishna. So if you go the Mayavadi way, it's much more difficult than if you go the Krishna conscious way. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching a mind to the activities of Krishna. This is practical because by hearing about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached to the Supreme Spirit. That's what we're trying to do by this Christmas and New Year period, focusing on the unique qualities of Krishna. Right? It is just like the feeling of satisfaction a hungry man has for every morsel of food he eats. The more one eats while hungry, the more one feels satisfaction and strength. Similarly, by discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore the expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness. Does that answer your question? Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Everything is in the Bhagavad Gita. And you're going to see this even more tomorrow when we carefully read the verses that I told you to read. you're going to be shocked. You're going to say, what? I didn't realize it was there in the Bhagavad Gita. Haribol. You only need this one book. It's all there.